Hi there. Today's lesson, we're going to explore this question. What do the Bible stories of David, Moses, and the prophets teach about the relationship that God wants with humanity? In the Exodus story, we see how the Bible shows God's values and priorities for humanity. For the Jewish people, then for Christians as well, what God does in Egypt at this time really defines who they are as a people and what their relationship with God looks like. One important thing to understand about this story is what it meant for the Israelites to be slaves in the ancient world. Now, today we do understand that slavery is a terrible thing, it's a terrible way to live, and also we understand that it's a great evil to do to another human being. But in the world of the ancient Egyptians, nobody thought that way. Nobody could even imagine a world where slavery would not be normal and accepted. Ancient nations would go to war against each other, and anyone on the losing side who was not killed would become a slave. And this was almost always the case for thousands of years, both before and after the story of the Exodus. So while today anyone who enslaved another human being, which does happen, that person would expect other people to be judgmental of them. They'd expect to be punished if they were caught. But there was none of that kind of expectation in Egypt when they were enslaving the Israelites. What is more, since the lives of slaves were in some sense spared, the idea of killing one was just totally normal. So you wouldn't kill a hard-working or obedient slave, just like you wouldn't set fire to your own house. But you would answer to no one if you just decided that that slave wasn't worth having them around. In fact, the king of Egypt does exactly this. He says, you know what? I've got too many of these things lying around. I'll just chuck some in the river. So in this instance, Pharaoh is speaking about persons, innocent persons, in the same way that I talk about clutter or junk in my garage. That is how Egyptians thought of slaves. Now, the important point is that at the beginning of the book of Exodus, although God has promised that the descendants of Abraham will become a great nation, they are in fact absolute nobodies. No one in the whole world around them sees anything wrong with their imprisonment, their torture, their forced labor, starvation, or even the murder of these people. It's just simply the way the world works. It's this people, these are the people who God finds and listens to in the story of the Exodus. What this story shows us about the relationship between God and humanity is that before God comes on the scene, the people have absolutely nothing. They have no property. In fact, they are considered to be property. They have no rest and no comfort. They are beaten and worked mercilessly. They have no one on their side. Their society and maybe they themselves are seen as trash. And they can't decide anything for themselves. They are totally powerless. But listen, God calls these people my people, and God cares deeply about their suffering, enough to take action. So what does the Bible stories of David, Moses, and the prophets teach about the relationship that God wants with humanity? Well, In the Exodus, we learn that without God, his people have nothing, and we are totally dependent on God. And we also learn that God is not interested in the wealth or power of the king of Egypt. In fact, he is totally interested in the people who have no money, no power, and no status. And that is what we learn about the relationship between God and humanity from the story of the Exodus.